Part 4 of Byline Times' investigation into Dan Wootton just dropped. And let me tell you, they know how to write a headline. But unlike sensationalized headlines from tabloids, this one actually delivers. You know I love some receipts. Dan Wootton paid porn stars with son's debt money for covert catfish sex videos. That is not the headline Dan Wootton wanted to see before he goes on his GB News show. But the fact that these drops appear to be timed for hours, if not minutes before Dan goes on air it's well played. This is something I have been discussing in my past videos on this investigation. Where's the money coming from? And one train of thought was that he was just slipping it in billables for News of the World and The Sun. And that apparently proves correct because they have evidence. Here it is. Dan Wootton, Sun UK, June 10th, 2016. Hi, I need blank set up as a new payee, please. He needs to be put down for $1,500 urgently on the Amber Heard splash 4-5 from last week. Thanks, Dan. According to Byline Times, this fee was for a porn star. As the article described, Dan Wootton would rent Facebook profiles from adult male performers. He would pretend to be them. He would trick his targets into meeting up with these performers, only to be filmed with covert cameras that Dan provided. How did Dan have time to work with all of this criming? I'm not an expert in UK law, but my understanding is that a private location without someone's consent filming is illegal. Not to mention improper use of funds at his workplace. We keep talking about where the tipping point is, where The Sun, GB News, and others finally turn on Dan. And I do wonder if this is getting us closer. Some other highlights from this piece. Byline says that they have identified 2 of Wootton's catfishing victims. Byline can confirm, that these 2 people have given information to the police about their experiences with Wootton from 2009 to 2016. So this is when he's at News of the World and then The Sun. He is in his early 20s in 2009. So again, he does not have this kind of capital to go running out paying for his crimes by himself. I feel pretty good now about my theory that it's not a third party that's paying him off. There's not some evil overlord, using Dan as a marionette. I think it's just Dan taking advantage of billables from his office. White collar crimemen with a side of, ew, gross, what is wrong with you? So basically this is how it would work. Dan would offer a couple £100 to these adult male performers to use their Facebook profiles. And he would start messaging them as these people. And while he was going, he would be deleting his trail as he went. Then Dan would reach out to the performers and say, hey, I've got a guy here. Are you interested in coming down and filming? One of the performers is quoted as saying, these people we used to meet, I didn't know who they were. I think they were from Dan's circle, and the films were an attempt to get a one-up on them. He can't say for certain that this is what Dan was doing, but he also brings up the point, why else would you do this? Why would you go to such lengths? It is either some sort of deviant behavior or something he gets pleasure out of, or it was simply to get blackmail on people that he worked with. And perhaps both, but either way, this is illegal. This is a crime that deserves to be properly investigated, among others. But the big thing is Dan wanted people recorded without their consent. And it appears that in at least 2 of the cases, the performers were unwilling to do that, kind of sabotage the whole thing. The first part, Dan literally drives with the performers like a mafia boss to this target's house. This is 2016. So they go up to this target's house and he's like, you 2 really want to film with me? You 2 porn stars? And they're like, yeah, we just like to do this for personal use. The guy is not convinced. So they do a little bit of free play, which is lighter sexual activity. And then they pull out the camera. And the guy is like, no, I do not want this filmed. So they were like, okay. They go up to Dan. They're like, good and do it. One of the actors tells Byline Times about a time that Wootton wanted him to meet up with someone that he catfished at a local London hotel. And it's a meeting that would have been very close to Dan's flat. In fact, this actor says he even went up to Dan's flat to discuss the details. He says, and this is important, that Dan specifically wanted this individual filmed in secret. According to Dan, the target said that he had agreed to having this filmed in secret for personal use. I don't know if I believe that. But the thing is, Dan would book hotels to where some of these events were being filmed. And here is one of the receipts from June 2016. It's a one-night stay conveniently near his flat. It appears that it was forwarded from Dan to this individual hours before check-in. There's also the FYI Holiday Inn booking. What you doing? Committing crimes at the Holiday Inn. What's also interesting is this originally was to Dan Wootton at The Sun UK. My assumption is that this was booked by somebody on the staff at The Sun, and then they forward him the information to let him know that that had been booked. And it appears that this was booked with the understanding that it had to do with something involving the Amber Heard Johnny Depp case. Oh, but wait, there's a third man that Dan Wootton paid to make a secret film. This was again to an unwilling, unknowing third party in 2012, this time at the London Savoy. Apparently in a suite that was paid for by then sponsors of the BAFTAs, the telecoms company Orange. Good God. So originally this man says that he dealt with Martin Branning, Dan Wootton's alter ego, and had previously made secret filmings for Branning. I'm assuming like his first victim, Dan wanted to make sure that he could trust this individual to film and get the job done before elevating him to this larger catch. Why he unmasks himself as Dan Wootton, I do not know. According to this individual, quote, "It was on a Sunday during the BAFTAs while Dan was still at the Sun. I got a message from Wootton himself. He asked me to secretly record me," this is in parentheses, "performing a specified sexual act on a man who did not know he was being filmed," end parentheses, "at a hotel room at the Savoy for money," end quote. The man goes, but for whatever reason, there is no sexual activity and they just end up getting drunk at the minibar. But he had still been filming and Dan still wanted that video. I don't remember the story of that government person who was set up in a room with prostitutes in a attempted sting, but this kind of sounds similar. Like even if they didn't do anything, he could still say, I have video of you getting drunk with a gay man who is known to perform acts for money, and I will let this loose. It wasn't the actual act, but the video would still speak volumes. As of right now, Dan is still doing his nightly show for GB News. He has not done a column for the Daily Mail, though, since the investigation started. Maybe they just quietly put that on the back burner, but didn't make a big announcement because they didn't want to make it a huge thing. But that column has quietly disappeared. Apparently, the House of Commons Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee, which is chaired by Conservative MP Dame Caroline Dinenage, I don't know if I'm saying that right, has reached out to The Sun, Victoria Newton, to investigate. Whether there's any actual investigation going on or if this is for appearances, I don't know. Questions posed by Byline Times to News UK have not been answered, although, quote, "It has appointed legal firm Kingsley Napley to investigate the allegations made against Wootton," end quote. The question I keep asking is, when does it become more costly to protect Dan Wootton than it is to turn on him? And I'm thinking bigger than money. I'm thinking of impacts or ripple effects that Dan going down could have on the tabloid industry. Will it be crossed? Will we see justice? And what does justice even mean? Is it Dan losing his job? Is it Dan actually being tried for these crimes? What does justice look like? I think that's also a very important question to ask. More to come.